All right, well, today is the second day of deer season here in Ohio, and we're utilizing our time right now, midday, to film another episode of Tailgate Talk. And today we're going to discuss everything related to our Kentucky trip from last weekend. So depending on when this gets out, it was September 17th or something like that. Mid-September, we went down there for a weekend. We had some great weather, nothing to do. Easton, myself, Corey, and Abby met up with the guys from the Whitetail Experience down there and had a heck of a time on some public land. So we're going to kind of break that down today to go along with the video itself from the weekend. And this is our second time starting this Tailgate Talk because I screwed everything up on the first take. So hopefully this one goes well. But yeah, we went down. Jake was unable to go, but he's been down with us the past few years when we hunt later in the year, which we typically do. So it'll be fun to kind of compare and contrast the differences we've seen now that we're starting to learn that public piece a little bit more. But Easton and Abby, you guys headed down
Friday morning, early Friday morning.
Early Friday, right, and started scouting, kind of breaking it down. And you said we might as well start here with the maps. I spent no time on the maps, which we'll get into, and why I regretted not looking at the maps. And you spent a lot of time doing that, which led you to seeing a deer on the first night. So
yeah, you in our first take you had started to mention, you know, finding sign and all that, and down there it's a lot different than where we're at right now. And I have some experience hunting hill country, so that was more of a natural transition for me, more so than either of you guys probably. But I've gotten more comfortable looking at maps in that type of terrain, which it's pretty hilly down there.
Very,
you know, it's not like mountains, but it's you know, couple hundred feet in elevation change, I would say, in some spots. So you have ridge tops, you have saddles, you have bottoms, and that kind of allowed me to pinpoint where the movement would be concentrated to, more so than out here where it's kind of concentrated to just the blocks of timber and then field edges and stuff like that. So I had like 4 different spots picked out on my maps going into Friday evening when we got there, Friday midday when we got there. So we put boots to the ground and checked out a few of those spots and ended up hunting one of them Friday night and saw one little buck. And then you guys got in the tree Friday night too, or did you guys just walked around?
Yeah,
right?
we ended up, we had planned to,
right.
But on the note of sign, which I wanted to talk about, it was a great learning experience for me because my whole mindset going down there was to basically get boots on the ground like Easton did as soon as we got down there Friday evening and just walk some of these ridge systems until we found some good sign that we felt confident in setting over. But what we noticed is the hill country compared to here specifically, you don't see this time of year anyway a lot of like very definite sign.
Right.
There's good trail systems. You might find a rub here or there, but it's not like what we've been seeing here. You know, rubs popping up everywhere, scrapes all over the place, acorn flats that are just destroyed. So that ultimately caused us to basically walk all evening long. Unfortunately, we ended up bumping into a few different hunters, one of which was Dave from the Whitetail Experience. So that was a pretty unique way to meet him for the first time, and we felt horrible. But our mindset was just to walk and find sign, and we ended up crossing paths. But I think for future years to come, I might walk and find one of those trail systems and just set up over it, because I think with those the hill country and the ridge systems, the saddles you mentioned, like they're not, and I don't think the deer density is what it is here, personally. No. Maybe it is, but I just don't think you're gonna find until you hit November any of that real concrete sign, which isn't a bad thing.
That's a good point. Normally when we're going down here for our kind of annual, at this point, late season trip that we take in December, we're seeing sign that would have been from the rut.
Right.
And we're seeing all these rubs and old scrapes that really aren't being hit anymore. So it was interesting to go down this time of year when you're not seeing that sign. So you know it's happening sometime in between, but it's cool to see both sides of it, I guess.
Yeah, it would definitely change how you had to hunt it, just because of, that's where your experience with maps will come in, because it's not a for sure thing, but if you know what to look for on a topo map, you can find the saddles, you can find the 3/4 point of a hillside, and you're looking at areas and you're going to end up hunting over areas that have higher odds of deer movement being through those spots.
Something that was interesting to me too is the Acorn Flats, or the Acorn stands or the oak stands that we thought would have a lot of deer sign in them, didn't necessarily produce like I thought they would. And I think that was because it seemed like every oak tree we found was just raining acorns. So even if you sat in those areas, basically the whole woods was raining acorns. So they didn't concentrate to those areas as much as I would have expected them to.
There's no reason to. Around here, like we started to talk about, these small 5 to 20 acre timber blocks, if you've got a group of oak trees in those timber blocks mixed with maple and poplar and everything else, once the beans turn yellow and brown, odds are that before sunset and early in the morning, they're going to be on those acorn locations. And because there's just, you have a sea of beans that's 500 acres, and then you have a 20 acre block where there's actually good nutritious food. Down there, it's 400 acres of unbroken timber with acorns everywhere.
Right. Here, it's sucking deer in, and there, it's probably spreading them out. We know big bucks don't like to be stacked on top of each other, so they have so many options down there. But, I mean, you can, like Dave, and we'll drop a link to some of the whitetail experience content in the bottom of this video. But yeah, Dave had a good hunt over in Oak Flat, and I don't think you're going to see a large quantity of deer in those areas, but luck of the draw, you pick the right one, you might shoot a good buck early season there. But I think I wanted to talk a little bit about mornings versus evenings. Obviously, the first evening, we all saw deer in camp. We all saw deer, including some of the guys that weren't even camping with us, but that we ran into. But the mornings, I don't know, I feel like that's such a tough nut to crack, especially on public land this time of year. And we haven't quite dialed that in yet.
I think that's because you got to get in your tree stand at 2:30 in the morning to beat them back to their beds. And you got to know literally where within a 20 yard block they're actually bedding down. And that could be different every day of the season at the beginning of the year.
It shocked me because there are some food sources on this public that we were hunting, and we were running into those deer in the evenings. The weather was absolutely perfect to have deer on their feet in the mornings, but we all got skunked in the mornings. So it definitely seemed like evenings were the ticket.
Yeah, and like going into it, I really wasn't focusing as much on the terrain features. When I was e-scouting, I had focused on large private land food sources, and I was going to get as close to those as possible on the public.
That makes sense.
And that's what I did the first night, and we saw that one little buck. I think Dave and them, they focused a lot on the terrain features, and then they kind of got into the oak flats and stuff like that, or the areas with a lot of oaks. So kind of two different ways of going after it. And what did you guys focus on? I think the first night you ended up seeing some deer on food sources, so I think that's kind of switched your direction too.
It changed our gears completely. I totally planned on morning and evening finding a ridge or a saddle and trying to find an oak to sit over. That was it, or some sort of trail system. But the first night walking around, like you said, on those food sources, we ended up bumping into a couple really solid public land bucks. So that completely shifted our mindset and our approach for the next day.
And in our experience, that isn't super common, and I don't know if it's because we normally go later in the season, and by then these food sources have been pressured so hard by other hunters who want easy access and easy spot to sit, and so the bucks aren't doing that anymore. But for whatever reason, this past weekend when we were down there, it seemed like a lot of bucks were still hitting those real obvious food sources, which was different for us, and that switched our gears, and that's kind of the route we took following that first night.
I don't want to say it was a fluke. I think it was just early enough, perfect weather, and the fact that that particular food source was the least accessible. I mean, that was a couple mile
It was
walk.
Almost 2 miles. I measured it,
So I would say not a lot of guys are going that deep in that type of terrain. So I think it was kind of a perfect storm, a perfect recipe.
Not this early in the season. Maybe closer to the rut, people will walk back there, but not this early.
Yeah.
One thing I thought was interesting is that the muzzleloader trip that we usually take every year, I mean, we just plan it around when muzzleloader season is, and we don't care really at all about the weather. Like, we don't look at cold fronts or any of that stuff.
No, we'll be there either way.
This year, early season, like we went and did early season in Kentucky the first year, and it was blisteringly hot, miserable,
95 to 100 degrees.
And I don't think any of us saw any deer
Nope.
at all the whole weekend. And so for people like us, the way we do it for muzzleloader, where you can plan it a year in advance, early season in Kentucky, like you guys hit it perfectly, because you were able to scoot out of Ohio and go down there right as a cold front was hitting. So if you can, those early season trips, if you can wait and plan at the last possible minute, I think that's going to help you too. That's probably true across the country.
Which is really hard to do, and there's no guarantee, you know, that'll align in years to come. But if you can afford to do that or plan ahead and do that in a short notice, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't even think we necessarily planned to have that cold front. I was just going because I had a free weekend and it just so happened to be good weather. I think if the weather would have been hotter and we hadn't lucked out, we wouldn't be having the same talk. We probably
Sure.
wouldn't have seen those same deer or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I think we really did luck out with cool, nice weather.
Absolutely. That's a good point. That's a very good point. I thought something cool to bring up too was the amount of, well, there was more hunting pressure than I expected and that we've seen in years past, but the amount of water access hunting pressure. There's a lot of guys that are going in via boat, which is cool, but it shocks me how many guys are willing and able to do that.
I think that's probably some social media influence there.
I think so too.
Public land hunting, for whatever reason right now, is super trendy. We do it because we want to go out of state and do something new, and public land's just the option to do it if you don't have access to private. Right.
Cheapest option.
And it seems like with all the YouTube and Instagram and all that, it's become super trendy to go to public land, get in a kayak, go in as deep as you possibly can, find these remote areas.
I know people who have bought a kayak for the first time simply because they want to try hunting that way.
Yeah, because you're guaranteed that there's a 150 behind the deepest tree.
Well, that's what you
in
think.
the far back.
Yeah.
And he'll be back there.
Oh yeah.
Every time.
He's in the creek.
Yeah.
He's in the creek.
Damn those YouTubers.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, the guy we ran into, so our first evening there, our first evening actual hunt where we got up in a tree and we ended up hunting over
For you guys, Saturday night.
Saturday night, right. We ended up hunting over a food source where we had spotted those bucks the night before, and we saw those bucks, and Corey almost shot one of those bucks, but a guy came in via kayak, had slipped in behind us, we didn't even know it, and he went in his first night out, shot a great public land buck, and he was dragging it out through the field that we were set over and ended up bumping those deer before Corey could get a shot. But yeah, it just, I mean, there was a guy from out of state, said, it's my first time ever stepping foot on this piece. I came in through the water, shot a deer. Yep. It's like that. I was shocked how much you see that now.
Just that easy.
For him it was. Yeah, for him it was. And we were super happy for him. We obviously, just like we bumped into guys the night before, he had no clue we were there. He ended up walking right under us. We whistled at him, climbed down, talked to him for a minute. He had a long night ahead of him, so we kind of, went our separate ways. But just goes to show you, and that is pretty cool that anybody can do that. Anybody can look at a map, figure it out, go there, and find success.
He had said he found those spots e-scouting, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. He had picked a location that he wanted to sit and literally killed a deer on the first night.
He saw a pile of deer. I think he said like 7 or 8 deer. So, and that, kudos to him, because that's kind of what I, going down there, wanted to do. Find a ridge somewhere and set up top and see if deer filtered through. And that's exactly what he did. He wasn't very far from us, and that buck that he shot, I'm pretty sure we saw the night before. But yeah, super neat, and he hit it just like us at the right time and had a great hunt.
I was hoping to go back down this past Thursday and Friday by myself. I was just going to sleep in my car, but that was terrifying. No, I actually got bogged down with like 10 homework assignments. But I was interested to see, part of the reason I wanted to do that was more so just to see if the bucks would still be doing what they were doing. Because what we had talked about afterwards was that I don't think they were going to do that much longer. A, because of the pressure. B, it just seems like when Ohio's opening weekend falls, is always when deer are completely switching what they're doing.
Yep.
So I was interested to see if what they were doing would resemble what they do when we go late in the season.
Right. I would say more so. I think even talking to Jared, we've made friends with a really cool guy that hunts down there, and he's super generous, super helpful, and always, coordinates with us, and we talk things through. But he kind of said the same thing. He's like, that hunt you had, like, that's probably the last time you would have saw that deer out there. Like, and it was too, like, the night before was a little earlier, and then we hunted it, and it was right at last light, and it's like, I think you're right. You would have went down there between that and the warmer weather and probably saw some does.
Given that my plan wouldn't have been to probably hunt over food sources, and I'm not calling food sources like acorn, oak areas, those I would probably consider something else, like ridges and stuff, but I'm talking like actual...
Planted in the ground.
Right.
Like,
I probably wouldn't have went with that approach, just expecting the deer to not still be doing that. I probably would have went for more terrain features centralized around oaks, maybe. But yeah, I kind of wish I would have went, but at the same time, our season opened up and I need to be here for that.
Right. What's cool too about going, and we utilized this the last morning, like, we just sat on the ground, but we gained a lot of information that way as well. We explored new ground that we had never set. We'd been to that piece, but we had never been to that specific area. So we explored new ground. We sat for, the prime time where we thought we might see deer movement. And then after that, we utilized the rest of that morning just to kind of walk around and figure things out for future hunts, which if you can do that, if you have the time to do that and maximize, I don't get too caught up in like, oh my God, I don't want to, booger these deer. Like, I think especially in areas like that, they're so used to that pressure. Yeah, you might jump him out of his bed and spook him off, but he's not going to go to the next county. Like, they'll be back in there, and I don't get too concerned with that anymore. So I like that we got up and kind of walked around, figured things out, found some old signs, some old rubs. I think when you spend a whole weekend in a different state, you took the time to drive all the way there, you spent the money on gas, food, whatever. If you can utilize every ounce of time you have, you might as well.
Make the most of it. That's the beauty of an earlier season opening like that in Kentucky, because you can go down and instead of driving down in August and simply scouting, you can do both at the same time. You can hunt while you scout for future trips, which is nice. I mean, I don't think you'd want to do that in Ohio because the season opens so late. There's no point to doing it. But
I know a lot of successful hunters that use that morning, the first solid hour of light to actually sit, and then after that they get out of that stand, or if they're hunting on the ground, they get up and they use the rest of their time to go and actually figure things out. If you're not seeing deer, more than likely they're somewhere else, so go find that sign. I do that quite a bit. I don't do that as I get into late October and November. You're wanting to actually sit and wait out those mornings, but early season is like a prime time to maximize your time and get out there and figure things out.
So I have, since I wasn't down there for this specific trip, I have a question for you guys. You can get a lot of stuff done on the internet, scouting wise, looking at topo maps. You can see water sources and all of that stuff, guesstimate where food plots might be or where food sources might be that are close. But is that truly sufficient? Or do you think hunting out of state on public ground requires a certain amount of boots on the ground scouting?
I would say yes, to an extent. I think using the internet to guide you to a starting point is sufficient. I mean, that guy went in there the very first night and he had never stepped foot on that piece of public. We have. And all he had done was look on the internet and got to a spot and killed a deer. Whether that was a fluke or not, I don't know. But I would say, yeah, the internet is sufficient for somebody driving from out of state, absolutely. But it'll never equal boots on the ground and seeing it. The number of times I've looked at something online and then went there and I'm like, what?
That's what I was getting at.
This is what it looks like?
That's what I was getting at.
Right.
It gives you a great starting point. Like, it's a great home base. Like, you can, like you said, you picked out 4 spots, right? You had 4 spots already in your head, whereas if you wouldn't have looked at that, you would have been like, well, I guess we will start walking. It gives you a really good starting point, and honestly, it's probably making hunters more successful to have that readily available. Because, yeah, like I'm reading the turkey hunting book right now, and he talked about hunting public land back in the 80s, and he would do all of that same scouting, but with real maps. And he would go to local, DNR offices and pull the maps and study them and circle stuff. And I don't think a lot of guys were willing to do that. Now it's so easy that I think hunters are more successful, and there's obviously more people doing it. This is going to get way off topic, but I refuse to believe there's less hunters. There's no way. We're running into more and more every single year.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just think about getting permit. Yeah, I don't want to get too far off topic, but think about getting permission on private land. Either it's already been hunted, or it's leased, or they just flat out don't let people hunt it. Like, it's hard to find anywhere that isn't getting pressure, even on private land.
Especially on private.
So to answer Jake's question, I think gives you a great starting point. Yeah, you can't beat being there and seeing it with your own two eyes, especially early in the year when everything's thick, and like you might look at it and say, oh, this access is going to be easy, and then you get there and it's all overgrown and a pain in the butt, and you got to be there.
One of the tricky things for me is, like, you see an area that you can tell has some sort of trees in it, and whether that's early successional, just thick, nasty multiflora rose or whatever, or if it's 100-year-old stand of oaks and maples and whatever. That's one of the problems I've ran into, is kind of determining what type of habitat certain areas are that you will never probably figure out until you get there.
Right.
That pretty much, those were a lot of the key points I wanted to hit on as far as the sign and kind of the approach we took. I think our approach, the original approach we had, was skewed because we ended up seeing deer on those food sources, which we didn't plan to hunt, but then we saw good bucks. So the second night of hunting for you, the first night of real hunting for us, we ended up doing something completely unplanned and hunting over those, which if we hadn't have seen those bucks, I don't think we would have been in those locations.
Absolutely not. And I'd be willing to bet that when we go for our late season trip, we're not going to be doing that again. We will be in those spots that we find online.
Well, you saw the slammer I shot last year in Kentucky, right?
Yeah. What'd that thing score? 14 inches?
Man, it ain't good though.
Yeah,
it sure did. But the last thing I was going to talk about is completely unrelated to deer hunting, but was the dog.
Yeah.
We found a dog while we were down there. Dave and I had gone out for a morning hunt / scouting mission, and we ran into, well, he spotted, I didn't even see the thing, but we were parking one of our trucks down by the boat ramp, as he had a canoe that we were going to canoe back to our campsite with, and there was a dog down by the river that was in poor shape, rough shape.
Which at that point you thought it belonged to another gentleman down there?
Yeah, right? There was another truck, and he wasn't there. He had already put his boat or his canoe into the water. We thought maybe it's just a really, well-trained dog, and he's waiting for him to get back, so we just left him be, and then we went and did our thing, and 4 or 5 hours later we came back, and the dog hadn't even moved. The truck was gone. So we elected to kind of examine him, and he had a couple big holes in his side, one in his rear end, and we initially thought he had been shot. I thought for sure it was like an entry and an exit wound.
And he did look like a hound dog, like probably somebody's hunting dog, so it was realistic to think that maybe somebody had taken a poke at him because he ruined somebody's hunt or something like that.
I was convinced. Like, I think I even said in the video, I was like, this dog's been shot. Like, I thought he ran under somebody's stand and some jackwagon slung an arrow at him. But anyway, we took him back to camp, and Easton's girlfriend, Abby, absolutely fell in love with him.
Took him under her wing. Yeah, and that was, we ended up keeping the dog for a period of time. We actually just gave him away to somebody who was willing to give him a home 2 days ago. But when we were in Kentucky, I think I counted 9 different numbers that I ended up calling between humane societies, animal clinics, veterinarians, and the dog warden.
Shame on all of them. That was the poorest communication.
And I pretty much got the runaround from every single person.
I mean, he said he was going to come out, right? He never even
the dog warden said he was going to get with me and check the dog out and see what he could do. And he did not end up doing that until the next day when we were already back in Ohio. So we ended up taking him to a vet, and he had not been shot, but one was just a growth, and the other one was either the same thing or a wound that had abscessed and basically kind of gotten infected. He got his flea treatment because he was just miserably infested with fleas, and went on an antibiotic, got that all healed up, and we found somebody who was willing to take him, which actually was somebody related.
Yeah, a family member of the guys, some of the guys from the Whitetail Experience. So
Right.
Thank you for taking him. You think they have a horse farm? He's gonna love it there.
Yeah. Abby was not thrilled about giving him away because that dog actually was a really, really good dog.
He was a good dog.
Like the most sweet and chill dog ever. But
How old
yeah.
did the vet think it was?
The vet said he was in the range of 8 years old. So yeah, and he definitely said some type of hound, maybe mixed with a lab. But yeah, and he also said that the dog had more than likely been fending for himself for quite some time.
Just to clarify, this dog was on its deathbed pretty much, had no tags, no nothing, completely abandoned.
Right, yeah,
so.
it's not recommended to just snag up stray dogs because more than likely they might belong to somebody, but this dog was either gonna die or go with us, and I tried to do the right thing by giving the right people a call, and obviously that didn't pan out, so we did what we felt was right to actually save this dog and give him a shot at life.
Well, it was crazy too because it rained so much down there like the couple weeks prior, and there was just like a highway of dog tracks down to the river. So he was just like chilling there because he could barely move, and then trying to creep down and get some water here and there. So
Yeah, when you guys picked him up, didn't you say like he wouldn't even lift his head?
he couldn't even stand up on his
Yeah,
own.
too weak to, So
Yeah.
by the time, I think we had him for 5 or 6 days total. By the end of it, he loves kids, would follow kids around, still drinks an unusual amount of water. He would drink like 20 bowls of water a day. But yeah, super cool dog, really energetic, and yeah, just fun to have around, I guess.
Yeah. So we had a blast in camp, awesome weather, saw some deer, almost killed a nice buck, great company. It was an awesome trip.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun.
Yep. I wish it would have lasted.
Wish you could have been there, Jake.
a few more
That's
days.
part of what public land hunting is about, though, because we say it all the time about hunting in general. You never know what you're going to get into, but on public land, out of state, that's more true than ever.
Yeah. You're not running cameras.
No.
It's fresh ground to you. You haven't been out there all summer scouting bean fields, watching the deer that you might see in the woods.
Yep.
Yeah, it's all new.
Does that pretty much cover it?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
I'm jealous.
We'll get down there for muzzleloader. We plan on going back. We may even go again early. It just depends, and if we all get lucky and shoot a buck in Ohio, we'll probably be going there every weekend. So we'll see what happens. But on that note, yeah, we're into our season here in Ohio, obviously, so we're going to kind of transition our videos now to some of our hunts from here, and we'll periodically do some tailgate talks. Hopefully we'll do a tailgate talk with a big old 150 in the back of the truck. That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
He didn't go 20, did he?
Didn't go 20.
Didn't go 20. But thank you guys for watching. Like I said, we will link some of the Whitetail Experience stuff in the video below. They did a podcast on the trip as well, so you can kind of hear their side of the story and what they ran into and what they saw. Like I said, there's some super cool dudes, and we had a lot of fun with them. If you guys want some of these hats that Jake and I are wearing, they're available on our website as well, and we'll put that down there also. See you guys later. You guys had saw a little buck, so your scouting had panned off. Panned off?
Panned out. I've panned out.
Paid off, panned out. I'm going to keep it straight. I'll bite my lip.
So your scouting had